So if you just Google Elling Eye Center BioBlitz, it'll show up on Eventbrite for you. Okay, cool. Are you set? Are you all set up? Okay, cool. All right, so I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker tonight. Do you prefer to go by JP?
That's fine.
Okay, so JP Charisma. I will tell you if you are on Facebook and you're part of these native plant gardening groups, like 12 different groups like I am, JP is very active in those groups. He's super knowledgeable about native plants. I would consider him like a native plant influencer, and we could always use more of those. So we are very excited to have him. I also know he has his own nursery that he has, and he grows his own plants as well as he landscapes yards as well. But I'll let him tell you a bit more about himself. And then we've got a whole presentation on butterfly gardening, which is his true passion. So I'll pull it up for you and welcome to JP.
Thank you.
Yep. You can come on over here.
It's gonna say like, just show me.
Yeah. Okay. Where's yours?
Hi everyone. Thank you guys for having me. Can we just hire my agents? Should say like this. There we go. Gotta make sure they can hear me. All right, thank you guys for having me here today. We'll be discussing butterfly landscaping for the real Florida. So I'm an experienced entrepreneur specialized in native plants since 2019. I worked at a native nursery. After the native nursery, then I worked at a landscaping company. And then I decided it was just time for me to do my own thing. So the secret is not to chase butterflies, but to plant native host plants in your garden so they will come to you. So there's two key elements for landscaping for butterflies. The first one is plant identification. For me, I realized I wanted to attract very specific butterflies like the pipevine swallowtail, and they need a very specific plant to attract them. And so you can't have the butterflies without the plants. Why the plants are so important. Butterflies need host plants and nectar plants. Host plants are where the butterflies lay their eggs on. Nectar plants provide food for the adult butterflies. So you want to combine both host and nectar plants. And so colorful gardens attract butterflies. Different colors will draw different kinds of butterflies. So if you have like white, red, purple, those will attract very specific ones. Also, butterflies are more than beauty. They're indicators of a thriving ecosystem. They're essentially going to be one of the indicators letting you know that they're a part of the food chain. And so when you see an area that has butterflies, that means that area is pretty diverse. So as you can see the butterfly, the caterpillar, the plant they might eat, and then some of the other animals that heavily rely on butterflies. And only 10% make it to adulthood. So most of those caterpillars that are eating your plants are pretty much food. So there's 5 steps for planting a successful butterfly garden. Survey your property. Assess existing plants, look at historical photos, and use historical resources. That's very important because a lot of the plants will give you indications on if the soil pH is very acidic or if it's very alkaline rich. For me, if I see a area that has like sable palmettos popping up everywhere, that's going to be more of an alkaline rich property. And then if I see stuff like a hog plum or like blueberries or something like that, I can tell that the area is definitely more acidic. And so this is a map from FAN that tells you some of the historic zones of some of the ecosystems that are in your area. And so for where Sarasota is, it's looking like it's more pine flatwoods and a little bit of prairie mixture in there as well. And so design. When it comes to design, I know everybody wants, pretty, beautiful flowers, but when it comes to those flowers, depending on which ones you pick, they can become more high maintenance and they're not going to be as easy to maintain. So if you want something a little bit more low maintenance, you got to kind of know the flowers that are less aggressive or more aggressive, or you could just choose something like a bush or a shrub, and that will be a little bit slightly less maintenance. And so you want to create a true habitat in your landscape and not just, oh, I like this plant. Like the whole goal is to create habitat for wildlife. And so plan your budget. You can do a lot of different things. You can do seeds, you could do smaller plants, you could do donated plants, you could work with somebody that might have, an area that's going to be developed and ethically source those plants as well. You can just ask them, have them give you a signature that you're allowed to take the plants from the property, and you should be good as long as they are the owner of the property. Write up a plan for execution. That's probably one of my biggest struggles when I got into this. I wanted to do like 10 different things, but when I started to write down, design, the landscape design, figure out what were some of the previous historic plants that might have been there, then it gave me a clearer picture of what it was that I really wanted to execute for that space. So I would give myself a timeline and say, hey, we're going to try to complete this during the fall when it's a little bit cooler, and I would just already have everything planned out now. So then that way, when fall rolls around, I already know what it is I'm looking for, approximately how many plants I need. And so when the time comes, I can finally get it done. And so picking plant quality is super important, especially if you're going to want to have a successful landscape design. So choosing healthy young plants for success is probably one of my biggest steps whenever I do any landscape designs. And so you can see that this root system is nice and healthy. There's no brown or mushy roots. And so this plant is going to not only, you can see it's already kind of outgrowing the pot. When you plant it, it's already ready to be established in your garden. And so it's not dead, it's dormant. You can see right here, there's a Asclepias incarnata that has broke dormancy, and then the other one that hasn't, but I took it out of the pot and you can see the root system is still healthy. Planting for butterflies seasonally. So why planting for butterflies is important seasonally is because there's different butterflies that will migrate here, and they are only here for a short instance of time, whereas some butterflies are here year round. And so some of them are like the red admiral, the checkered whites, the great southern whites, the American lady. Those ones, they're not really here that long. They're here now, and then they're probably going to be gone by the end of May-ish. There might be some stragglers, but most of those end up flying away. The cloudless sulfur and the gopher Larry are year-round flyers, but we get our biggest migrations typically now and as well as in the fall. Well, I do have this presentation also on FNPS's Lunch and Learn. Okay, perfect. And so here's some spring, early summer blooming wildflowers. We have prunus, tickseed, thistle, sparkleberry, skullcap, fleabane. These are just some excellent spring blooming wildflowers. Then we have some spring through fall butterflies, and these are all your swallowtails. I typically see them a little bit more in the warmer months than I do in the spring, but you will see, the first brood coming in the spring, and then right around like literally next month, it's going to be an abundance of all the different swallowtails. And so here are some of the plants. One of my favorites is definitely got to be the ironweeds and the native milkweeds, of course, and then also like summer farewell. And so there's also the fall winter migrants. Right here is the mourning cloak. Those guys they're going to migrate here typically around the fall/winter area where Florida's a lot warmer versus where their typical range is a little bit northern in Georgia. And so they have bred in Florida before, but if you have the plant, they'll come. And so for fall, winter blooming wildflowers, this is just a list of all the different types of wildflowers. I just kind of generalized it so that way you could see what direction you should take for getting them. So like some of the goldenrods have different ranges. So if you find out which blazing stars or goldenrods or asters have their native range in your area, then you can choose them. And so these are our year-round flyers. Definitely some pretty ones like the Queen, the Malachite, the Julia, the Gopher Larry. We probably won't see Malachites here. You might get a couple of strays, like rare occasions, but you will see Julias, Cloudless Sulfurs, and your Buckeyes and White Peacocks. And so here's some year-round blooming wildflowers. So for structure and plant communities, the entire point of the design is we're trying to kind of replicate all the different tiers of an ecosystem. And so understanding plant communities, having this structure allows you to build that plant community, and you'll basically know which plants will work well together, as well as kind of when you're implementing these plants into your spaces, it's more naturalistic. And so there's trees, shrubs, vines, wildflowers, grasses, ground covers. Kind of looking at it like this kind of gives you a different viewpoint as to what you can play around with in your garden. So like if you need a space with grasses, you could choose a specific grass for that place. Or if you need a vine for a certain area or a tree, then that kind of gives you it's like you're creating an art piece in your landscape. That's kind of why I use these illustrations, because you're painting the picture of what the design is going to look like. And so for trees, I think it's critical and crucial to definitely make sure you know what tree you're planting. Because as you can see, the oak understory is more partial to part shade. So initially, if you have like nothing there and you plant an oak tree, the wildflowers that you planted when you first planted the oak tree are probably not going to persist once that tree reaches full maturity. Whereas if you did a pine tree, you can see that this is more, there's more light under here. And so the wildflowers will still persist under the pine tree, unlike your oak tree. And so here's some suggestions for plants that you could plant that attract butterflies that are good trees. And so the wild cherry is a keystone species. The willow is a keystone species. And then here's red bay. Red bay is a cool one. It does the palamedes and the spicebush swallowtails. And then the winged elm. I like this one. It's a good street tree. It can withstand a lot of soil compaction. So a lot of people should try this out instead of the non-native elms that they plant. And so shrubs gives you a nice texture. And so here's some of the different textures. You got your wild lime, you got your saw palmetto, and you got your fiddlewood. Completely different appearances when you're trying to create a landscape that is cohesive. Because if you have, like, for example, if you planted a button sage lantana next to a wild lime, they're gonna kind of clash because they have very similar shapes. So if you put like a saw palmetto near it or a fiddlewood near it, then that would allow the wild lime to kind of have its own show. It would kind of showcase that shrub versus clashing. And so there's the saw palmetto. You can get them in green or you can get them in silver. I know the silvers are supposed to be on the East Coast, but they're very pretty. And then there's the firebush. The firebush, definitely make sure you're going to a trusted native nursery when it comes to the firebushes. A lot of people don't know the difference between the firebushes. I'm not the best at keying them all the time, okay? But definitely make sure you go to a trusted source for your firebush. You're gonna have to double and triple check. I'm telling you, I've seen it happen numerous times. The Flatwoods plum is a good one. I mean, maybe for here, you might get away with a Chickasaw plum. I think they're a little bit hardier than the Flatwoods plum. I know we're a little bit further south. Wild lime definitely does good. It's more of a coastal species. Button sage lantana does good here. Bahama senna will do good here. Tea bush does great here. Wildflowers and grasses. So different shaped flowers attract different sized butterflies. Like you can see, there is a hair streak that's in that tiny little flower, the composite flower, and then there's a giant swallowtail, the biggest butterfly in North America, nectaring on that firebush. And so here's a great flower that I love. It can do well in pots and raised beds as well as in the ground, but I tend to plant them under like an oak tree because when you bring them this far south, they don't perform as well as they do up north. And so Starry Rosamond is a good one too. Chapman's Goldenrod. I like this one. It's a lot less aggressive. It doesn't spread rhizomously as much, and it stays kind of short. And so Spike Blazing Star is a great one. Purple Thistle, Silkgrass, Moneyflower Beard Tongue. I'm just trying to blow through these because there's a lot of slides. Seaside Ageratum's a great one. It's a better one than Blue Mist Flower if you ever heard people recommend it. This one is a little bit more hardier and coastal. And then wildflowers need grasses. So as you can see in these pictures, there's a bunch of wiregrass under these pine trees, and these wildflowers are being supported by the grasses. That's why they're able to stand up nice and tall. So in the wild, all these different herbaceous and four plants are competing for sunlight. And so when they're competing, they ultimately end up supporting each other in the process. But you're gonna want to plant, your blazing stars or your goldenrods typically around grasses, so that way you don't have your liatris falling over. So when wildflowers are mixing their grasses, boom, boom, boom. Basically what I said previously. Okay. Chalky blue stem is a good one. Chalky blue stem hosts at least 3 to 4 different skippers, if I can remember. It has a really nice color. It gives you a nice texture as well. And so when you have a lot of greenery, but you want a pop of color that's a little bit nice, I recommend chalky blue stem. Purple love grass is a good one too. It's a nice foundational grass, but the one thing I don't like about it is how aggressive of a reseeder it is. This isn't my landscape. I do keep it in there when it reseeds, but I typically will yank out a lot of them because they do reseed readily. But Elliot's love grass is a little bit less aggressive and it is a little bit more salt tolerant. So it is a great one to include in the landscape. It kind of has that same chalky appearance as the chalky blue stem, and it is a lot easier to get your hands on this versus a chalky blue stem. Piney Woods drop seed is good too. I love the inflorescence on it. It's really pretty. If you chop them down, it will do the inflorescence multiple times throughout the year if you just chop them down. Split beard blue stem, that's another great grass. I wish it was in nursery trade more often. It just adds these dainty, ethereal inflorescence and they just sway in the wind. I love this grass. Vines. So the vines that helps maximize diversity. If you don't have a lot of space, a vine can probably, climb up a wall, a trellis, an arbor, and you'll be hosting different butterflies. So maypop's a good one. This is true native, Florida native white passion vine, maypop passion vine. I am trying to find a way to get that in the tray because it is just so gorgeous. Hosts 3 different butterflies, the gopher lariat, the zebra longwing, and the Julia. Then there's white flowered passion vine. I kind of like this one. It's a little bit more coastal, found typically around the Keys, and it probably would do really well here. But I say this vine kind of prefers its root systems to be in the shade, whereas when it climbs up, it will head towards the sun. So keep that in mind if you do plant it. Spurred butterfly pea, it hosts the long-tailed Andorrantes skipper. It is an aggressive plant, but it will help add more butterflies. And then the white twine vine. This is a great one for the soldiers and queen butterflies. The monarchs are not going to want to lay their eggs on it as much, but they will eat it if it is in your garden. And then the Florida milk vine. This one is gorgeous. I like this one. This is definitely more of an inland species plant. But as you can see, it has these beautiful kind of like burgundy magenta flowers, and it is a winter dormant vine, so keep that in mind. And then ground covers. You can use ground covers for multiple things, suppress weeds, replace your lawn, and maximize that diversity. And so beach verbena is a good one. It's definitely more coastal. You could do Tampa verbena since it is vouchered on our side of the coast. There's rayless sunflower. I like this one. It can withstand a lot of different, it's very adaptable. It can do dry, it can do moist, but I wouldn't say it can do wet. So it is a good one to add, and it has such a pretty, like black flower. It's almost like a gothic flower, if you will. And so you have the blue porterweed. That one's a good one. It is pretty tolerant. I did do someone's landscape and it did reseed everywhere and it did come back after the hurricanes. So it will withstand that salt. And then frog fruit, that one's a good one. It is somewhat salt tolerant. I have seen them. I have seen this in Fort DeSoto, so it is slightly salt tolerant to an extent. And then water hyssop, that one's a good one for the white peacock. And it's pretty. I like the way it looks. I kind of have this one in a pot. And then best practices for planting. So when you're installing plants, you want to dig your hole 2/3 bigger than the pot. That allows you to fill the dirt in properly. And then for the planting level, if you plant it high, it will never die. If you plant it low, it will never grow. And so for root-bound plants, you're going to want to correct the root system. And so this is one way to correct the root system. Some people, they will just cut off the lower section of the roots and then they will just shove the plant in the ground. Others, this is actually a longleaf pine sapling that one of my friends, Jennifer, corrected the roots. And she kind of goes on the extreme level where she will literally extend the whole entire root system and then she will help guide it back into the ground. And so this is another way that she also does it. where she will kind of basically uncurl the roots and then kind of like space them out horizontally and then allow them to spread. I've done it a couple of times, but right now is not the ideal time to be correcting root bound plants. I would just buy a plant that already has a healthy root system. For transplanting, definitely dig a wide hole, make sure the hole is moist, and the best time is December and February. And so mulching around the base of the plants is kind of crucial because as it's getting hotter, the plants are going to start losing moisture from water transpiration. And so if you add that mulch, it will help prevent the plant from being stressed out and potentially getting, too many pests on it. Establishing your plants, definitely for the first 2 weeks to a month, you want to water them in. I have noticed with trees, you probably want to keep watering it for a year. I don't know. The trees, they just kind of take a lot longer for the root systems to develop. You could do it where you water them like when as needed, not so much every day. And so if you see, if we're in a drought like today and your tree is like struggling, you might want to give it some water. Make sure you water it really, really deep. And if you water it deep and then you don't water it for a bit, the root system will be trained to keep searching for that water. And so over time, the tree will become less dependent on water. Maintaining landscapes, time of the day, I try to do 7 to 11 a.m. That's ideal because you're not fighting with the sun. You get it out the way, you're done, you can do what you want with the rest of your day. Second best time is 4 to 7 p.m., but you will get bit up by mosquitoes. Effective weed management, the best time to suppress weeds is definitely during the winter months. I say that because whenever I get the chance to weed during that time, come spring and summer, I have a lot less I have to do. So, as an example, Biden's album, it is a very aggressive reseeder. I don't want it in my landscape in particularly. They are studying if it's still native or not, so I don't need it. There's a lot of other wildflowers that you could plant. Um, but essentially that is a great time to do it. It's not as hot. You get it all out of the way, and you can just have a better season the following year. Native host plants, commonly disguised as garden weeds. So there's Florida pellitory, it's a host plant to the red admiral. There's roughroot scale seed, which is slightly different than mock bishop weed, but a lot of people who are in drier places have this plant. They don't have this one, which is mock bishop. Mock bishop likes to be more in wet mesic settings. And so there's Virginia pepperweed, as you can see. It's a host plant to the great southern white and the checkered white. Then there's Sweet Everlasting. That's a great one. It's very floral. I feel like this should be in more gardens. It is a little weedy, but I think it's kind of worth it instead of having the non-native cudweed in your yard for the American lady. And so leave the leaves. Leave the leaves, let those leaves turn into mulch, break down, and enrich your soil. And there's a lot of different living organisms like your silk moths and some butterflies and some skippers that may be in that leaf litter. So if you just leave it alone, literally just don't do anything and you'll have butterflies. So allowing plants to complete their life cycle is definitely crucial and critical. You can see these are some queen butterflies that are literally resting on some tropical sage in my backyard, and it allows shelter. So just let the plants do their thing. It's more sustainable. And if you leave those dead sticks alone, you can allow these larvae to complete their metamorphosis process and turn into bees. So trimming plants, I would say these are some of the ideal times that I like to do cutbacks, and I kind of categorize them. So March and April for my bushes and shrubs, because by the time that happens, the bees that were overwintering are probably already out. And then May/early June, that's our typical fire season. If you know anything about like uh, prescribed fires and all that stuff, typically around that time is the ideal scenario for places to be burned because that allows the forbs and the grasses and everything to get the chance to come back in. And so if you have a very long goldenrod in the middle of May, if you chop it back down come the fall again, it's going to be the same height. They just grow that much. And so that's a good time to keep things in check. So like if you have a liatris, so like a blazing stars, I see them in people's gardens and they end up on the ground. But if you chop it, like you have to chop it all the way down. Like you cannot like leave a stem because if you leave a stem, then the blazing star will like shoot out and will spiral. But make sure that your blazing star is established really, really well first. So, it's been like 3 or 4 months, and then, the blazing star's looking a little too tall in May, then you can chop it all the way down, just water it and it will come back. And so butterfly landscaping hacks, use partial shade to your advantage. So I'm kind of reiterating, the pine trees are really, really good. So if you want, wildflowers and you want coolness, then like having that partial sunlight is ideal. Plant more than one. Definitely you want to plant more than one plants, especially for host plants, because when it comes to those host plants, when the butterflies come, they're going to eat them all down. So you're kind of playing Russian roulette. You might plant these plants now and you might get butterflies. You plant them now, you might not get them for a couple of years, but at least you'll have enough to give them the crucial habitat that they need, especially with the vines. Like, I don't know if you ever had polydamas or pipevine swallowtails in your yard. They eat a lot of vine. They eat a lot. And so I recommend doing 3 gallons if you can get them, or if you get three 1 gallons. So that way you'll have enough for them to go through their metamorphosis process. And it's just when you have more than one plant, it's not even just for the host plants, but for the nectar plants, it kind of gives the landscape an easy design for not only for you to read, but also for the butterflies to read. And there's been a couple of studies that Jared Daniels has done where they have mass planted wildflowers instead of just getting one, one, and one. And they ended up having more pollinators in a garden that had, mass plantings. We're not trying to do a monoculture, but at least have 5 different species that are mass planted. So then that way the pollinators that can utilize those flowers will keep coming back and it's easier for them to know that they have a place. And so for coppicing is a great way to incorporate some of those larger trees. So like a red bay tree, they do get pretty big. I do know that they get the laurel wilt, but some people they plant it. And so they want it for the Palamedes or the spicebush swallowtail. And if you coppice it, then the tree stays a lot smaller than the maximum size that it will become by coppicing it. And so there's container gardening. That's another good one. It's not as sustainable, but it will allow you to host different butterflies. And so there's Golden Alexander. That's more of a northern Florida plant. In the Panhandle, it's not so much central and south. So if you put it in like an earth box or something like this, then it will live. False nettle will do the same thing. It's a more mesic plant. It's more so found around like creeks and rivers and stuff, but it will host the red admiral butterfly. And then there's the Dutchman's pipevine. That's actually mine. It's probably double the size right now. This picture was taken a couple years ago, but I've had it in that pot. Sometimes they just don't do as well in the ground for some plants. All right, so that is the end. This is my GoFundMe. I have been saving up to move out my parents' place so I can do this even more and help educate people even more and sell even more native plants. But anyways, your time has come to finally be a butterfly.
Top 5 plants you'd recommend? That's all we're gonna go plant right after this, so. Answer well.
I mean, I have 5 plants over there, so. What is your goals? That's what I need to know. Okay, where are you located?
Sarasota.
So definitely the Bahama cassia, the tea bush, the wild lime. That's 3, probably the porterweed number 4, and then number 5 probably corky stem passion vine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That there were different colors that attract different butterflies, so like white flowers, red flowers, and purple flowers. Can you touch more on that?
I like to look at things with more of a scientific approach. I have read a lot of different articles. I do have my own like anecdotal evidence, but I would say I typically will see like swallowtails go towards a red flower versus a white flower, you know. But some instances, it also depends on the shape of the flower, you know. So, like if I see a flower that's more of like a multi-composite flower that's white, then like I will see butterflies with shorter proboscis hit that flower, you know what I mean? So essentially, if you do have those different colors, like I will see sometimes, especially with purple, I will see more swallowtails on the purple versus the white. So I'll see them on purple and I'll see them on red. But with like the monarchs, I typically will see them on like yellow, like my coreopsis, or it just kind of depends on what's blooming. Because sometimes the white and the purple kind of bloom around fall and around spring, like early spring. It's I just don't have a very conclusive answer for you, unfortunately. Was there anyone else?
Tell us about what you brought.
Okay, so I have brought a mixture of blazing stars. I brought pipevine. I brought rayless sunflower. I brought pennyroyal. That's a good one, and a couple grasses.
And those are obviously for sale.
Yes. Mhm.
I have some of the torquey stem, and it's like, it comes up all over my yard. I have a terrible time though trying to dig it out and transplant it somewhere. Is it like, would it be better if I put it like in a pot rather than just trying to dig it up and stick it somewhere I wanted it?
Yes, it'll do really well. Put it like in the shade if you do put it in a pot, so that way the plant will be using its energy for the root system and not growing. Probably take at least like a week or two, probably 2 weeks at least minimum, and then plant them.
I'm like getting into this idea of using it as a ground cover.
Yeah, you can use it as a ground cover. It will kind of spread out, but then the caterpillars will eat it. And
I give it a go, that's deep, but I always end up getting it. Wow.
I was gonna do it this year, but I just decided to do cuttings. Mhm.
On the mini or the white passion vine, the mini flower one.
Mhm.
Have you ever propagated that one? 'Cause I've been trying different ways.
I have propagated it by cuttings, but you have to use like the newest cuttings, and then it's a very like on and off plant, that one. It's like sometimes it'll do really well by cuttings, and then sometimes you won't get a single cutting rooted. Mhm.
Are you using it from?
No, I don't use any rooting hormones. Mhm.
Yeah, you were saying, you showed the malachite there, it's interesting, every star I see, Florida, malachites are around here, you go to Spanish Point to the butterfly plant, they're malachite. And I never see them out in the wild at all, and you just said, yeah, they are around here.
Yeah, malachites, it's a very complex, but not too complex. So malachites are actually, they flew naturally from Cuba to Florida in like around 1960, and then they created their own population here. So if they are here, they're typically around South Florida. They might come up like the wind or something might carry them up, but they're typically like in those like pine rockland or like hammocks in South Florida. Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, they use the Ruellias, so they use an invasive plant like green shrimp plant, but they will utilize the native wild petunia as well. Mm-hmm.
It's just like, how did your passion for this? Where did it come from? How did it fall?
Do you want the Cliff Notes version or you want the deep version? I mean, I would say I was always passionate about wildlife as a kid. I would always walk around my neighborhood. I still live there now. And when I first was doing it, I had no idea what I was looking at. I just knew that it was nature and it was pretty and I enjoyed it. And then over time, I started to learn about butterflies. So, like in school, they showed us the monarch butterfly life cycle, and I learned the concept of what a host plant was. And that stuck with me. And so like during COVID, I was walking around with my dog and I see these black and white butterflies, and I'm like, well, what butterfly is that? What plant does it need? And so I go down a rabbit hole figuring out that, there's zebra longwing butterflies and they need passion vine. And so in the process of doing that, I end up like figuring out like there's pink swamp milkweed. Then I'm working at a native nursery. The native nursery, because I was there and everything was there, it was very easy for me to retain the knowledge because I'm there every day. And so I already had like a passion for wildlife and butterflies. And so when I'm in that environment, it just allows me to retain the information a lot faster. But you can also learn by just going online. I know that UF, I don't know if they still have it out anymore, but I used to just read their entomology studies. Like they would just have entire articles about every single butterfly, and I would just sit on my phone and just read everything. And so it just kind of spiraled into that. And I was like, well, maybe I should become the person that I wish I had that could teach me all these things. And so that's kind of what like keeps me going.
Have a follow-up to that, what's your?
So the dream business, I so I have a really good plan for how to keep it up sustainably, but the ultimate goal would be to have my own native botanical garden. Like that is what I truly want. So I could have events, I could have like educational seminars where people could like learn how to grow their own food. Or if they wanted to start their own pollinator garden, they could come and they would have a place to actually like learn this hands-on because I feel like that's one of the best ways to retain this information. Like you can always talk about like the concepts and everything, but like when you actually have to go and execute it, when you have a space to practice, it makes you feel more comfortable and you'll feel more inspired to like do it at your house, like after you're done learning. I'm in Riverview, so I'm about like 40 minutes away.
So. Well, here, but you say they're for the year, and I'm thinking the pipeline and closing.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, it doesn't really like it where I'm at either. I mean, I have one in the ground that's somehow alive. I don't know how. It's an anomaly, but that's why I recommend like putting it in a pot because some people they're like true native like nerds and they're like, I want this plant. So it's like, okay, we'll try it in a pot and it might actually do really well.
It's a huge one. Humane Society out by the dog runs. It was a huge one. Oh, really? Yeah. Maybe dog do this stuff.
It's located here.
Yeah, at the Humane Society online and.
There's a lot of this kind of goes back to my point about the plant identification because there's a lot of different pipe vines that are invasive and they get really, really big. And the tomentosa, I've tried planting that plant so many times and I'm in 9B/10A and they just do not like thrive. They don't.
About that subtlety of that. Yeah.
So the tomentosa, I think I've found for 7 in Smithfield, and oddly enough, the second one has really taken off. So I think they've been in the same spot, the same irrigation, the same soil, and I think there is a lot of genetic variability. It's the same with the pawpaw. I've tried the northern Trilobite pawpaw a couple times, and like some don't break dormants together while others do. So
There was one thing I didn't add in my presentation was for like the plant hack. A lot of people have been having problems with incorporating Asclepias tuberosa in their landscape. And one way that I found out how to introduce it was literally bare rooting the plant before I planted it. My yard, I think I have like the true native like sandhill soil. So every time I shake the dirt off and put it in the ground, it does really well. And I've had success planting it as like a little plug. So like maybe if you could get plugs or if you could bare root it and baby the plant, you'll have success. Because I've done that to an Asclepias tuberosa and it's been in my yard for 4 years now.
What's that Florida blue? Butterfly, the blue.
Oh, the Miami Blue.
Or Miami blue, yeah.
The Miami Blues, they're gonna be in the Keys. So yeah, we don't get them. I mean, there's the Cassius and the Serenus, but the Miami Blues, they're not looking too good since those hurricanes, and they do have a program at UF to breed them and release them. But if you do want to see them, you got to go all the way down to the Keys.
And on that, I spoke to Jared Daniels, he said the last one was verified in 2017. And they could have been reading, they didn't survive, they tried.
I would like to try that one.
Hopefully it's not like that, down south of Everglades, but it, something.
I mean, some of the butterflies, they have like symbiotic relationships. So I know with the Miami Blue, they are protected by an ant because they secrete a sugar on their back, and it like teaches the ant that like, oh, I'm gonna get food. I must protect you. So there's a lot of different nuances to every butterfly. We can't just say, oh, well, we introduced the Atala by everybody planting Kunti. We have to also account for some of the other environmental factors that we have to start learning about to help protect the environment.
About firewood,
Yeah,
how there's different kinds.
yes.
How would you know what the right time is? I mean, do they all look the same or?
They don't all look the same. I mean, sometimes you might find one seller selling firebush that will have a really, really deep red flower versus some that are selling a more of an orangish hue. But I do know that with the non-native, the firebush leaves are typically more green and more glabrous, whereas the native firebush is not as glabrous. It's more of like a satin texture leaf. But I still don't think that is good enough information to like properly key out like what a true firebush is. But that's why I said go to a trusted source, like go to Sweet Bay. They have the native firebush there.
Whatever, you've done, like, 4 or 5, non-native, 5. The native usually has 3 leaf of, that's the non-native.
I think it's Mexico. Yeah, they hybridize.
Touch a moment on, you brought up about the ground cover, and so I just have like that Florida grass that's mostly weeds and a little bit of hoo-ha.
A freedom lawn.
Yeah, but I was gonna put some frog fruit in, and were you saying that if that would help take over like some of the things like the Florida snow and that kind of, or should I be picking that stuff out? It just pops right back up, but.
I mean, I forgot to touch on this part. So, like, prepping the site is crucial in the success. So, you're gonna want to remove as much as you can and then put in what you want. You don't have to do it all at once. You just got to do it section by section.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Can you comment on that? Sleepiest biggest product?
That is another one I'm testing out with bare rooting, but not as much success. Asclepias humistrata, that is a good plant, but the nuance with not just that plant, but just milkweeds in general, they are a lot harder to introduce into a landscape. And so if you do not have the ecosystem in your yard that plant typically is in, it's more than likely not going to thrive. I have a friend that's in around Tarpon Springs, and he's planted plants and they did good 1 year, and then the 3rd year it was gone. So it's a very temperamental plant. It does seed a lot, but even though it has a high germination rate, the amount of plants that make it to full adulthood is very far in view, and they're even saying that they think some of the plants are like 100 years old because they've seen humus strata that has like 10 stalks coming out of it. It's very pretty. It is an important milkweed since the monarch butterfly comes and migrates here during the spring, and that's one of the first plants that's flowering. So it is a good plant. If you do have the right space, you could try to incorporate it. But as when it comes to hosting the monarch butterflies, it's not the most ideal milkweed for that because it's the most toxic. And so a lot of the butterflies, not the butterflies, the caterpillars have to adapt to eating it a very specific way that allows them to essentially manipulate the flow of the sap and the cardenolides. No, it's not that you don't want it. It's if you have the proper space for it, then I don't see a problem in incorporating it.
Which milkweed?
Asclepias humistrata, pine woods milkweed, or sand hill milkweed. Mhm.
Do you have any recommendations for minimizing OE? And then also, have you ever had like an NPV breakout and have to deal with that? Do you have any recommendations on how to mitigate that?
Okay. For OE, that is a very complex problem. And in Florida, we do have migratory and non-migratory monarchs. Most cases, it just depends on the time of the year. Like right now, most of the migrants they're pretty much gone, and we're heading towards more of the year-round population. Um, to mitigate it, my philosophy is a lot different than some of these other scientists. So a lot of the scientists know that the non-native milkweeds will allow the monarch butterfly that does have OE to continue to live longer, whereas the native milkweeds, they do not live as long when they're infected. So if you do plant native milkweed, and a butterfly is highly infected, then it's not going to be able to spread the OE parasite as long as one that has eaten non-native milkweed. So, but back to milkweeds being a hard species to incorporate. If you're trying for a long time to establish this milkweed into your landscape and it's not working, then maybe we should move on to a different butterfly, you know? And then for NPV outbreaks, there's multiple ways you can kind of deal with that. I tend to like either cut the plants back. Some people have tried to like sanitize the plants. It requires around 6 hours of sunlight to kill the virus. So if the plants are in like in shade or partial shade, you might want to cut the plant back versus, your maypop passion vine that might be in full sun. It will kind of go away on its own. But it's not really something that is easy to mitigate because you don't know which ones do have it and which ones don't until it happens.
So we had a big NPV outbreak at Coordinated Plants Nursery, and then I basically had to get rid of them all. I've tried every solution like that I could find online and videos, and there's really not a lot of research on it since it's actually like a biocontrol, right? What I did when I was observing it, because I took it home, and I had lots of native milkweed all over my yard, and I observed that it spread from one plant to another by ants, right? So the ants are always on the milkweeds and the nectaries, right? And like, so I was wondering like how it was spreading. So the only solution I've come up with is literally ripping the plants out. I've done the bleach solution.
Wait. Okay, you kind of lost me because you said NPV and then you said OE. Like, wait, which one? But you're saying the milkweed.
That's a big pop.
You said the ants were on the milkweed.
Answer on the maypop or the patent vine, but the nectaries. Sorry about that. And so like I've noticed that it's spread from plant to plant because the ants were like going from plant to I sat out there and watched it for days because it was driving me nuts. And well, my solution was to rip everything out because no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of it. And this was full sun and peak summer where it really should have, the sunlight and the heat been able to kind of.
They are studying it. There's a school in California that's studying that, and the zebra longwings also get it too. Mhm. It's a virus, and like you said, it is a biocontrol, and so like they just end up picking it up from like the dirt or like the air that comes in, and it once they get it, it's horrible. No, it affects the larva. So what will happen is the larva will reach basically all the way up to the fifth instar, and then it will climb up to the highest peak, and then it will melt all over everything. It's horrible.
Where it does like shed the disease like onto the plant, so it can be like spread by like barriers, right?
Mhm.
Yourself, irrigation that hits it and brings it down over the plant, like it's spreads very easily.
Yeah, once you get it, it's kind of hard to get rid of, but I haven't had too many issues at my place, but there was issues somewhere else. There's not too much you can do other than like you said, remove the plants, give it some time, and then bring them back.
Are really affecting active life or?
Yeah, mainly the Gulf fritillaries get it. The zebra longwings do get it too. And I think the Julias also kind of get it as well. But I would say the Gulfs are definitely the one that are more affected by it than the other two are. It's a virus, that's what I'm gonna say. No, NPV. Mhm. Mhm.
Black inside. That's,
Well, what do you mean the butterflies turn
so
the chrysalis? That the NPV will do that to Gulf fritillaries, but there are so many different pathogens and diseases that butterflies get. Sometimes it could be a bacterial or a viral infection. And so sometimes it's like maybe the area where the plant is not getting a lot of airflow or a lot of it's too humid. And so like some type of bacteria or virus will like accumulate in that area, and like every butterfly gets some sort of disease. So yeah, it happened. Oh yeah, it's definitely the NPV then, more than likely. Mhm.
I use pretty thorough, wash in the past for, controlling hookworms and different other things and, plant trees and fruit trees. What is your, feeling about that as far as this part of Florida? And, do you want to get your butterfly garden concentrated on a different part of your property? And the, fruit crop of another, or does it make it different?
I mean, it depends on what plants you have that are edible, because some of them are host plants to butterflies. So, I mean, you got to eat. But to give you a better answer, if you can, I would probably separate them if you are trying to create habitat. But just only apply what's needed to mitigate the problem.
I didn't realize that swallowtail was one of the, species that, the particular, eastern, Trichogama, journalist, about. Most of my read the bookworm.
Yeah, definitely try to research, because I do know that some of them are more specialists and they're not as generalists. So if you do, I mean, what were you trying to maintain? You were trying to protect your fruit trees?
Yeah.
Mm.
And in the past, Sarasota area,
Mhm.
and that used it in Cali and Texas for the pine trees and other plants that were affected by forest.
It's kind of hard to protect the fruit trees in Florida. Like a lot of our fruit, like even the blueberries get some type of larva that eat them as well. like a lot of like fruit, like farmers are doing the same thing. They're trying to figure out how to protect them, but
You can't find that, it's real hard to.
yeah, it is. Every season's different. Every season you'll get a different pest that you have to battle. All right.
So thank you so much, JP. Awesome. Thank you, JP. And I want to say that I saw you had like initially when I first found out about you, you had a thing where you wanted to have a picture of every Florida native butterfly on you at some point. Did you accomplish that goal?
No.
No. But you had quite a few because I've seen some pictures.
Yeah, I think I've done at least like 20 different species.
Like on his face, he'll have like a giant swallowtail or something. Of course.
I might have like at least one or two skipper pictures. Maybe like a long tail, and then like there's this other one.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny. You and I have a similar story. Like I got into native plants during COVID as well. We had a lot of free time to observe things, and I went down a very similar rabbit hole. So that's really cool. And here we are. Yeah, so, so cool. And then, so I just have a quick announcement, and then maybe you could just tell us a bit about the plants you have and prices and that kind of stuff. But really, the last thing I have is our next meeting is going to be our last meeting until the fall, and that's going to be on May 18th. So just the third Monday, like always, right here. And we're going to have John O'Miller and Julie Morris. And they basically have a radio show on WSLR where it's called Our Changing Environment, and they have it every other Tuesday, right? And they usually have a guest on, and they interview the guests and go back and forth. So we're going to try to reproduce a version of that here, where we have it in front of a live audience, and it can be broadcast on the radio as well, or parts of it. So that'll be a really interesting meeting, and they're obviously great speakers, have been super involved in the native plant community locally for a long time, many decades, longer than I have with COVID. So we're looking forward to that. So thank you, Julie. And thank you, JP, for coming out today. And so what is you have some native plants that are specifically good for pollination for butterflies and for different host plants for different butterflies as well.
I brought mainly nectar plants, just to add some color.
Mhm.
A lot of them are drought tolerant, and I think they should be incorporated in more landscapes.
Awesome. Cool. So talk to JP afterwards, buy some plants, buy some shirts in the back if you want to. Feel free to hang out as long as you want. But thank you everybody for coming out, and we'll see you next month.
Do you help people get nursery?
I have an online nursery.